Today we're going to look at the issue of women in senior positions. It coincides with the appointment of a woman, Alison Cooper, as the CEO of a major company. Now, joining me in the studio today to discuss this are Ruth Seeley and Sue Vinnicombe. Now, what we're talking about is a report that's been produced, and this is the 11th year that it's been produced, that looks at this issue of women in senior positions in corporate life.
Yes, that's right, Steve. It's the 11th Female FTSE report. When we started off, we originally just looked at the FTSE 100, but now we cover actually all the FTSE listed companies, but with a particular focus on the top 350.
Now, I mentioned at the start that a woman has just been appointed to the top position in Imperial Tobacco. Is this unusual?
It is. I'm afraid there's only still a very few female CEOs, 4 at the moment. And I would say, actually, looking back on last year, quite disappointing really, the position of women directors across the FTSE 100. I mean, it was just under 12% last year, and it's just marginally over 12% this year. So I would say overall we've stalled. And I think it's quite interesting that with all the focus that there's been on the banking sector, I mean, that's actually got worse, I think, hasn't it, Ruth?
It has. That's been quite a disappointment. A few years ago, all of the banks in the FTSE 100 had women on their boards. I think the situation today is just 3 of them have. And I think the percentage of women on the boards has gone down as well, from about just over 12 to just over 9%. So that's a big disappointment, particularly with the opportunity that perhaps the government could have taken with the recapitalisation of some of the banks last year.
So what does it take to be successful as a woman in business?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, Steve, because we could conclude from looking at the figures that perhaps there just aren't enough competent women in the pipeline. You know, simply the supply of women isn't there. But that's actually one of the big, I think, successes of the report. One of the positive findings is that the pipeline is huge and actually growing. So we looked at last year and again this year, the number of women just on the executive committees, which is one level down from the corporate boards of the FTSE 100, together with the women who sit on the corporate boards of the other FTSE listed companies. Last year that figure was 1,800. This year it's nearly 2,300. So we've added in another 400 women. So a tremendous and growing pipeline of talent, female talent. So you do begin to wonder what it takes. And actually this year we observed a very interesting trend in the new women who have entered the FTSE 100 boardrooms.
Yes, we had 23 new women appointed to female directorships this year, 14 of whom had not had a FTSE 100 directorship before. Of the 14, only 1 of them is British. 13 others come from a range of countries, not just North American, but some South Africa, New Zealand and other European countries. So that begs a question of, you know, what does it take for a British woman to succeed in FTSE 100 companies?
Is there something about the British character that seems to not gel with senior positions?
Well, I think that what we would say after 11 years of researching the topic, Steve, is that it clearly is a very biased process, the whole process of appointment to these top boards. I mean, starting from step 1, none of these directorships are advertised, so it's a closed system. And one has to say it's all too easy to just appoint somebody who the chairman knows. And I think, unfortunately, that is inevitably what happens.
So can we learn anything from other countries? I know this year you've included 2 extra countries in your report.
We have. I mean, I don't know, Ruth, you took a really good look at Spain and Norway as to whether you'd say there are 1 or 2 lessons for us.
I think one of the first things we have to acknowledge is that the cultural and political situations in those countries are very different to the UK, and you obviously need to take that into account. But I think a couple of the interesting things to learn is that they have come from positions which are actually behind the UK, and because they've taken some very active steps towards improving the situation, their rate of progress is much better than ours now. I think one of the things that really stuck out for me was that in Norway, in order to meet their quota law, which said that 40% of women on listed companies, publicly listed companies, had to be women, that they had to find 1,000 women, new women, to join their corporate boards. And when you consider that their country's population is just 4.5 million, that's quite an achievement if you compare it to, say, the UK, where we feel if you could just add 200 women to the number of female directorships, that would substantially change the landscape. And we have a population of 61 million here. I think that plus the figures that we've shown really show that this is not a lack of supply of pipeline. I think it's a lack of demand.
So, either of you, if there's a key message that you want to leave government with the heads of corporate boards, what would it be?
Well, I think one of the key points that comes out, Steve, is that, you know, the UK needs to look out. You know, Norway and the other Nordic countries as well, Spain, Sarkozy apparently is talking about quotas. These British talented women could well get invited onto the boards of these European companies if we don't watch out.
So watch out, because talent's going overseas. Absolutely. If we're not careful.
Definitely.
Thank you.